A quiet engineer, pushed to the brink by an arrogant HOA president, devises a brilliant, shocking payback. What begins as a simple power struggle escalates into an electrifying confrontation that will shake a suburban community to its core. You won't believe how this tech genius turns the tables. Don't miss what happens next when justice gets a jolt. Some people, Ethan Clark often mused to himself, his fingers expertly tracing the intricate pathways of a microcircuit board, don't just cross the line, they obliterate it with a bulldozer, then act surprised when they hit a minefield. His quiet suburban existence, a sanctuary meticulously built around his passion for electrical engineering, was under siege, not by a natural disaster or a common criminal, but by the most insidious force known to residential tranquility, the Homeowners Association president. Karen Dobson, known throughout the Evergreen Estates as HOA Karen, wielded her title like an imperial scepter, her word gospel, her decrees absolute. For years, Ethan had observed her reign of petty tyranny, her self-serving interpretations of bylaws, and her unapologetic encroachment on personal liberties, always from a distance, preferring to channel his irritation into his complex electronic projects. Yet, even a man who lived to avoid conflict had his breaking point, and Karen was relentlessly, obliviously, pushing him towards it. The problem, initially, had been a subtle hum, a phantom draw on his meticulously optimized home power grid. Ethan, a man who could detect a single rogue electron in a million, noticed it immediately. It wasn't significant enough to dramatically spike his bill, but it was there, a persistent, unauthorized siphon. His initial investigations were meticulous, starting with his own wiring, then his appliances, before finally, inevitably, leading him to the boundary of his property. There, partially obscured by a meticulously maintained azalea bush that Karen herself had once lectured him about trimming. Was the culprit a thick, industrial-grade extension cord, snaking brazenly over his fence, disappearing into the manicured chaos of Karen Dobson's backyard? A slow burn of indignation ignited within Ethan. It wasn't about the few cents of electricity, it was the audacious presumption, the blatant disrespect for his property, and more acutely, the gall being exploited. Karen Dobson, the self-appointed arbiter of neighborhood etiquette, was a thief, not of material possessions, but of his privacy, his resources, and his peace of mind. The sheer audacity of her act was breathtaking. He considered confronting her, imagining the inevitable verbal joust, Karen's indignant denial, her rapid deflection, her attempts to twist the narrative back onto him for some imagined infraction. He could already hear her saccharine tone, dripping with feigned concern, morphing into righteous fury. No, direct confrontation was not Ethan's style, nor would it yield the unassailable proof he instinctively craved. He needed undeniable evidence, something that would not just expose her, but dismantle her carefully constructed facade of suburban righteousness. The hum persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. He realized it wasn't just a trickle, it was a steady draw, likely powering something substantial. Curiosity, mixed with a chilling resolve, drove him to observe, from the discreet vantage point of his second-story window. A pair of high-powered binoculars revealed the truth. Parked beside Karen's ornate garden shed, an electric ATV, sleek, powerful, and undeniably expensive, was plugged directly into the illicit cord. The irony was palpable. The woman who policed everything from lawn gnome placement to the exact shade of house paint was shamelessly siphoning power from her neighbor to fuel her recreational vehicle. It was a perfect encapsulation of her hypocrisy, a shining beacon of her entitlement. Ethan, however, was not one for emotional outbursts. His mind, an intricate tapestry of circuits and algorithms, immediately began to conceptualize a solution, not a violent retribution, but a surgical strike, a defense mechanism disguised as an unavoidable malfunction. He envisioned a system that would not merely detect the theft, but respond to it with a controlled, undeniable consequence. He spent days in his basement lab, a realm of soldering irons and blinking LEDs, meticulously designing, calculating, and testing. His objective was clear. Anyone attempting to draw power illicitly from his outdoor receptacle would trigger a precisely engineered, controlled overload. It wouldn't be an explosion in the traditional, destructive sense, but a focused, contained electrical event designed to disable the offending device and, crucially, to provide irrefutable physical evidence of the unauthorized connection. He wanted the culprit to be caught red-handed. With their own ill-gotten gains as the smoking gun, he designed fail-safes, redundancies, and a sophisticated diagnostic logging system. The device, barely larger than a standard power strip, was a masterpiece of passive aggression. It was a digital sentinel, waiting patiently. When the illicit draw began, it would allow a brief surge, just enough to confirm the connection. Then, with a precisely timed jolt, it would trigger a localized overcurrent. The goal was to damage the ATV's charging circuit or battery, causing a dramatic yet contained thermal event within the vehicle's electrical system, enough to scare Karen, leave tangible proof, and avoid any actual harm to bystanders or surrounding property. It was a subtle, elegant weapon, built by a man who despised confrontation but excelled at decisive, technological retaliation. The final piece of his plan involved his sister, Zara. Zara, a whirlwind of digital activity and social media savvy, was the antithesis of Ethan's quiet solitude. She was his eyes and ears on the neighborhood's unspoken currents, his unwitting ally in the digital age. He hadn't told her the specifics, only that he had a project that might become interesting. He tasked her with keeping a casual watch on Karen's backyard, specifically noting when the ATV was plugged in. Zara, always keen for a bit of neighborhood drama, agreed with an enthusiastic smirk, her phone already poised to capture any viral moment. As the days turned into a week, the clandestine power theft continued. Ethan watched, waited, and perfected his system. He installed the device discreetly, embedding it within the exterior outlet box, a silent guardian of his electrical domain. The hum was still there, but now it was no longer a source of irritation. It was a countdown, a prelude to a crescendo of controlled chaos. He knew Karen would strike again, her sense of entitlement too ingrained to ever question her actions. And when she did, Ethan Clark, the quiet engineer, would be ready to deliver a shock far greater than mere electricity. Ethan's garage, a sanctuary of meticulously organized tools and humming electronics, transformed into a clandestine forge of digital retribution. No longer merely a workshop, it was a crucible where his quiet fury was channeled into circuits and code. Schematics, intricate and dense, blossomed across his triple monitors, their lines a testament to his intellect and his simmering indignation. He wasn't just designing a circuit breaker. He was crafting a symphony of controlled chaos, an electrical feedback loop engineered to singe more than just wire insulation. His intent was surgical to precisely identify, isolate, and spectacularly punish unauthorized current draw. Leaving no room for denial or Karen's characteristic bluster, the sheer exquisite irony of it all fueled his late nights. Karen, the tyrant of order and regulation, was about to become the star of a perfectly choreographed short circuit, a performance staged by the very man she dismissed as too meek to challenge her reign. Days bled into a singular, obsessive pursuit. The rhythmic hiss of his soldering iron became a percussive accompaniment to the escalating rage that, though rarely externalized, now throbbed beneath Ethan's composed demeanor. He wasn't just working, he was obsessed. He installed a bespoke current sensor onto the outdoor outlet, a tiny sentinel disguised within the weatherproof casing, its wires snaking discreetly through the wall to a sophisticated microcontroller, the silent digital brain of his counter-offensive. This device wasn't programmed for mere shutoff. Oh no, It was calibrated with malicious precision if the current draw exceeded a meticulously predetermined threshold, a wattage precisely aligned with the ravenous appetite of a high-powered electric vehicle charger, and if that draw persisted for more than a handful of seconds. The system would unleash its calculated fury. It wouldn't just trip a breaker. It would initiate a controlled overload, a deliberate, momentary surge of raw, unbridled electrical energy designed to trigger a specific, devastating reaction in the connected device. A failsafe, of course, was paramount. Ethan was a man of integrity, not a pyromaniac. The surge would be contained, localized, ensuring the spectacle was limited solely to Karen's illicit connection, before the outlet suffered a permanent, unresettable death until manually repaired by someone with considerable electrical expertise. The psychological toll of this clandestine operation began to gnaw at Ethan, manifesting in subtle shifts. His customary calm fractured into a hairline crack of impatience. He found himself less tolerant of minor glitches in his own home systems. His gaze perpetually drawn to the shared fence line, an invisible battleground. He curtailed his beloved evening walks, instinctively avoiding any chance encounter with Karen, fearing his carefully constructed facade might crack under her imposing presence. His sister, Zara, a force of nature in human form, a whirlwind of digital trends and unnervingly sharp observations, noticed the change instantly. "What's going on with you, E?" she prodded one evening, finding him hunched over a glowing schematic, his fingers tapping an anxious rhythm on his desk. "You're more tightly wound than a live wire after a lightning strike. And don't even think about giving me that just thinking about work nonsense. I know that look. It's the look you get when you're brewing something big, something you're not telling me." Ethan, usually a vault of guarded privacy, felt the urge to confide, to unleash his indignation. But Zara's immediate instinct would be to pull out her phone, to broadcast the injustice to her thousands of followers, to ignite a digital firestorm. While he valued her fierce loyalty, his plan demanded precision, not premature public outcry. "Just a particularly complex project," he mumbled, pushing the diagrams away. "Requires a delicate touch, high stakes." He offered a strained smile, hoping she wouldn't press further. Unbeknownst to Karen, however, the whisperings of her past transgressions were already circulating. Mr. Langston, a frail, elderly gentleman from 2 houses down, a man whose gentle demeanor belied a steel-trap memory, had already sought Ethan out, weeks before. His voice had been a conspiratorial whisper, his brow furrowed with lingering suspicion. "Mr. Clark," he'd begun, his gaze darting nervously towards Karen's imposing house. "I've noticed something peculiar. Karen's ATV, that whirring sound, it often coincides with a subtle flicker in my own lights. And my electric bill, it's been inexplicably higher. 2, I had a similar problem years ago, with a pool heater. She borrowed power then. 2, claimed it was just for a minute." Mr. Langston's words were a cold confirmation, a chilling echo of Karen's long-standing pattern of brazen exploitation. This wasn't merely about Ethan's stolen kilowatts. It was about systemic abuse, about a neighborhood held hostage by one woman's boundless entitlement. The revelation solidified Ethan's resolve, transforming his personal vendetta into a righteous crusade for the community. The chosen day, a sun-drenched Saturday, arrived with an almost palpable sense of quiet anticipation for Ethan. He had meticulously retested every circuit, double-checked every safety protocol, even swapped out Karen's obviously worn extension cord for a brand new, identically styled one, ensuring there would be no pre-existing weak links to complicate his experiment. He waited for 2 agonizing days. Nothing. Karen must have been away. Or perhaps her battery was full. A flicker of impatience, sharp and unwelcome, pricked at Ethan, but he suppressed it. True engineering, he reminded himself, demanded unwavering patience. Then, at precisely 3:17 p.m., as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns, the familiar, Obnoxious whirring began. Karen, in her usual theatrical flourish, backed her gleaming, impossibly expensive ATV up to her garage, the engine's smug hum cutting off abruptly as she reached for the familiar cord. Ethan, poised at his kitchen window, a mug of lukewarm coffee forgotten in his hand, felt a jolt of pure adrenaline. This was it, the culmination of days of intricate planning, sleepless nights, and simmering indignation. The moment of truth. He watched, every muscle tense, as she plugged the cord into the ATV's charging port with a casual, almost dismissive flick of her wrist, utterly oblivious to the intricate web of electronics now awaiting her command. The current sensor, a silent predator, detected the sudden, significant draw. The microcontroller, hidden and still, began its internal countdown. 3 seconds. 2. 1. Then, the air itself seemed to crackle. It wasn't a single, deafening bang, but a series of sharp, violent pops, like supersized popcorn kernels exploding with a concussive force. A blinding, almost surgical shower of brilliant, focused electric blue sparks erupted from the ATV's charging port, a mini fireworks display of pure current, accompanied by a thick, acrid puff of smoke that smelled faintly of burnt ozone and melting plastic. The ATV itself bucked violently, as if struck by an invisible, powerful hand, its internal lights flickering like a dying strobe light before plunging into absolute, permanent darkness. The charging cable, still connected, began to smoke profusely where it met the ATV, the insulation visibly melting, a telltale sign of catastrophic overload. Karen, who moments before had been adjusting her visor with an air of smug satisfaction, let out a shriek that tore through the quiet afternoon, a high-pitched, almost comical sound, laced with an undeniable, primal terror. She stumbled backward, her expensive sneakers tripping over her own feet, her face contorted in a mask of pure, unadulterated shock and disbelief. Her prized ATV, that gleaming symbol of her suburban dominance, was now an inert, smoking lump. Its charging port a charred, bubbling mess, irrevocably damaged. The cord, still connected to Ethan's outdoor outlet, was visibly scorched, a clear, damning testament to the sudden, overwhelming surge it had just endured. Ethan's system had worked with chilling perfection. It wasn't about burning down her garage. It was about burning a hole in her smug confidence, leaving undeniable, smoking evidence of an electrical anomaly right at the scene of her flagrant crime. The subtle problem had just escalated into a spectacularly unsubtle, undeniably electrifying public spectacle. The acrid stench of burnt plastic and ozone hung thick and heavy in the still, summer air, a choking, undeniable accusation that permeated the meticulously manicured lawns of Meadowbrook Estates. Karen Dobson, a pathetic, crumpled heap of indignation and sheer, unadulterated terror beside her smoking, ruined ATV, finally managed to scramble to her feet. Her face, usually a mask of regal authority, was now a grotesque, contorted caricature of pure, unadulterated disbelief and raw, desperate fear. "My ATV," she shrieked, her voice stripped bare of its usual imperious veneer. Raw and pathetic, a guttural, heartbroken wail that echoed through the stunned quiet, sounding eerily like a child's inconsolable cry over a cherished toy utterly shattered beyond repair. What in the world just happened to my beautiful ATV? She spun wildly, her eyes darting like a trapped animal from the smoldering machine to the still smoking, incriminating cable, and then, with a glare dripping with venomous accusation, fixed squarely on Ethan's meticulously kept home, a beacon of order amidst her self-made chaos, a primal certainty, a chilling premonition of impending doom. Coiled in her gut, this was no random act of gain, no freak accident, but her mind, a labyrinth of self-serving delusions, violently resisted connecting this catastrophic failure to her own audacious, daily transgressions, Before Karen could even draw another ragged breath to launch into her inevitable, self-righteous tirade, the distinct, piercing wail of a police siren sliced through the suburban calm. It grew louder, more insistent. By the second, a sonic harbinger of official scrutiny. Officer Kim, sharp, observant, and with an uncanny knack for arriving at precisely the most inconvenient, or perhaps opportune, moment, pulled her sleek patrol car smoothly to the curb. Her eyes, honed by years of mediating countless domestic dramas and absurd neighborhood squabbles, immediately scanned the unfolding chaos, the woman in obvious, theatrical distress, the smoking vehicle, and, most damningly, the unequivocally damaged electrical cord snaking with illicit intent across the manicured property line. She was already out of her vehicle, her hand resting casually, almost instinctively, on her utility belt, before the cruiser had fully shuddered to a halt. "What seems to be the problem here?" "Ma'am," she inquired, her voice calm, professional, yet utterly devoid of any discernible sympathy, a sharp, dispassionate blade cutting through Karen's escalating hysterics. "Officer O. Officer, thank goodness you're here." Karen wailed, stumbling forward, a grotesque parody of her usual authoritative self, her expensive designer clothes disheveled, her carefully coiffed hair askew, streaked with a fine dusting of what looked suspiciously like soot. It's an electrical explosion. My brand new ATV. Someone sabotaged it. Look at this. It's utterly destroyed." She flung a frantic, trembling hand towards the smoking machine, then emphatically pointed at the scorched cord, conspicuously, strategically avoiding touching the visible, damning damage on Ethan's side of the fence. It came from his house. That absolute monster. Her finger jabbed, trembling with manufactured outrage, directly at Ethan's quiet, unassuming property, a silent accusation hanging in the air. Officer Kim, a seasoned veteran of suburban theatrics, narrowed her gaze, her expression unreadable. She approached the ATV with a cautious, methodical step, inhaling the sharp, unmistakable tang of burnt electronics, a smell she knew all too well from faulty wiring and amateur repairs. Her eyes, trained to spot the minutiae, then meticulously followed the incriminating trajectory of the extension cord, her brow furrowing slightly as she saw it disappear over the fence and into the pristine neatness of Ethan's yard. Her gaze lingered on the weatherproof outlet on Ethan's exterior wall. It looked off, not visibly damaged, but subtly different, its slightly unconventional configuration whispering of an untold story, of something deliberate, something engineered. A mental note was made, a file, in her highly organized mind, was already opening, slotting this incident into a familiar pattern of community disputes, but with an intriguing, technical twist. As Officer Kim meticulously began to document the scene, photographing the wrecked ATV and the smoking cord with detached professionalism, her camera flash momentarily illuminating the lingering smoke. A figure emerged from Ethan's backyard. It was Zara Clark, her phone held aloft like a modern-day banner, a wide, almost incandescent grin playing on her lips, her eyes alight with a captivating mixture of mischievous glee and triumphant satisfaction. She had been recording everything, a silent digital witness to Karen's ignominious downfall, from the initial, shocking pops that had fractured the afternoon peace to the HOA president's pathetic, undignified meltdown. "Excuse me, officer," Zara announced, her voice clear and carrying, her phone still recording, broadcasting live to an unseen, rapidly growing audience. "I think you'll want to see this. It explains everything." With a flourish, she pressed play, and suddenly, the sharp, percussive pop-pop-pops of the electrical surge, uncannily clear, echoed through the stunned silence of the street, followed by the brilliant shower of sparks. And then, Karen's distinctive, terrified shriek, captured in perfect, unforgiving fidelity. The video, stark and unforgiving, undeniably showed the point of connection. the cable extending from Ethan's side and Karen's own hand, casual and entitled, plugging it in. The visual evidence was not merely compelling, it was a hammer blow, absolute and irrefutable. Karen's face, already flushed crimson with rage and humiliation, drained of all color, leaving her mottled and sickly pale, like a marble statue suddenly stripped of its vitality. That's private. You can't film me, she sputtered. A desperate, pathetic attempt to swat at Zara's phone, her hand flailing weakly. But Zara, nimble and unyielding, simply took a strategic step back, her focus unwavering, capturing every nuance of Karen's spiraling unraveling, every tremor of her disintegrating facade. It was precisely then that Ethan Clark stepped out from his house, a vision of calm and collected composure that stood in stark, infuriating contrast to Karen's frantic disarray. He carried a sleek tablet in one hand and a meticulously documented, well-worn folder in the other. He didn't glance at Karen, his gaze fixed directly, respectfully, on Officer Kim, a silent acknowledgement of her authority. Officer, he stated, his voice even, professional, and radiating an unwavering certainty. I can explain precisely what transpired here today, and I possess irrefutable evidence to substantiate every single detail. He walked purposefully to the fence, carefully skirting the still smoking cord, treating it like a hazardous, yet instructive exhibit. For many weeks now, Officer, I have observed an inexplicable and consistent increase in my electricity bill. As a diligent electrical engineer, I monitor my household consumption with exacting precision, almost to the milliwatt. He brought up his tablet, its screen glowing with a series of meticulously charted graphs, lines spiking dramatically at specific, incriminating intervals. Here, he demonstrated, his finger tracing a particularly egregious spike. You can clearly see the anomalies. Irregular, significant spikes in consumption, specifically correlating with the hours when Mrs. Dobson's ATV would be parked and, I presume, clandestinely charging from my outdoor outlet. Officer Kim's eyes widened slightly, her professional curiosity now fully engaged. This wasn't merely a petty neighborly dispute. This was premeditated. This was a calculated breach of trust, supported by technical data. In the cord, Mr. Clark, she inquired, her gaze sweeping from his compelling data back to the charred cable, its damage a silent, damning witness to the events. That, officer, is the direct result of a proprietary system I designed and installed to protect my property from unauthorized electrical draw. Ethan explained, his tone utterly devoid of triumph, purely factual, almost academic, as if lecturing on a fascinating scientific principle. After confirming, unequivocally, that power was indeed being siphoned from my outdoor outlet, the precise location Mrs. Dobson utilized for her vehicle, I devised a controlled feedback system. Its purpose to identify any attempt to draw a significant, unauthorized load from that specific outlet, and in response, to initiate a localized, self-contained surge designed to disable the connected device and, crucially, sever the unauthorized connection, thereby safeguarding my household grid from damage and preventing further theft. He pointed a precise finger at the smoking end of the cord, a silent, damning indictment. What you and everyone else witnessed was the system engaging. It identified an excessive, unauthorized load, confirmed it originated from an external connection, and initiated a controlled electrical event to prevent further illegal appropriation of my resources and to preserve my home's electrical integrity. Karen let out a strangled gasp, her mouth opening and closing uselessly like a beached fish, struggling desperately for air, for words, for any semblance of control that had so suddenly, so spectacularly abandoned her. You designed that thing to explode my ATV. You psychotic lunatic, she shrieked. A fresh, overwhelming wave of outrage and sheer, unadulterated terror washing over her, threatening to drown her entirely in its bitter tide. Non-destructive, Mrs. Dobson, Ethan corrected calmly, almost kindly, his voice a balm to her hysteria, yet laced with an undeniable steel, gesturing with a subtle nod toward the still smoking, but physically intact. ATV. The system is designed to disable, not destroy. Your ATV's charging components have likely short-circuited, rendering it inoperable for the moment. But the vehicle itself should be entirely repairable with a professional. The damage, as you can plainly see, is contained precisely to the point of connection. The very interface where you were attempting to draw power illegally from my property. At that pivotal moment, drawn by the cacophony and the flashing police lights, a figure slowly shuffled out from his house. It was Mr. Langston, leaning heavily on his cane, a living testament to Karen's long history of exploitation. He approached the scene cautiously, his eyes, sharp and clear despite his age, fixed with a steely resolve on Karen. "It's true, officer," he rasped, his voice trembling slightly with age but firm with unwavering conviction. "She's done it before. Years ago, with her pool heater. My electric bills skyrocketed, and I found her cord connected to my outdoor outlet. She claimed it was just for a minute. I was too old, too tired to fight her back then." He looked at Ethan, a glimmer of profound admiration, of quiet vindication, shining in his aged eyes. A silent thank you for a battle finally won. But Mr. Clark here, he found a way. A proper way. Karen's face was now a grotesque, mottled patchwork of crimson shame and deathly white, a raw canvas of her unraveling. The combined, crushing weight of Ethan's meticulous, irrefutable evidence, Zara's damning, viral video, and Mr. Langston's powerful, corroborating testimony was utterly dismantling her carefully constructed facade of unassailable authority. The neighborhood, too, had begun to gather, drawn by the sirens and the sheer, undeniable spectacle unfolding on their quiet street. Whispers, at first hesitant and hushed, then growing bolder and more indignant, rippled through the small crowd. Faces that had once worn masks of resigned deference to Karen now openly displayed expressions of shock, then growing anger. And finally, a collective, profound understanding. The quiet community had always harbored a deep-seated resentment for Karen's overbearing nature, her petty tyrannies, her blatant abuses of power, but they had always lacked the tangible proof, or the collective courage, to openly challenge her. Now, in this singular, electrifying moment, illuminated by the lingering smoke and the flashing police lights, they had both. Zara, ever the architect of public awareness, didn't just record for her own private satisfaction. As Ethan calmly presented his damning evidence, she swiftly edited a concise, compelling snippet of the raw video. She added a powerful, dramatic caption exposing Karen's brazen hypocrisy and lauding Ethan's ingenious, high-tech solution to a pervasive community problem. With a final, triumphant tap, she uploaded it directly to a massive video-sharing platform. Within minutes, the video began its inexorable, viral spread, the clip showing the smoking ATV, Karen's frantic, humiliating reaction, and Ethan's impossibly calm, analytical explanation exploded across the digital landscape, quickly gaining millions of views, not just in Meadowbrook, but across the nation, across the globe, the quiet neighborhood. And soon, the entire internet knew exactly what Karen Dobson had done, and precisely how brilliantly, how elegantly, Ethan Clark had responded. The power balance in Meadowbrook Estates had just shifted, dramatically and irrevocably, and the tremors were beginning to be felt far beyond its quiet, once controlled streets. Karen's carefully guarded secrets, her iron-fisted authority, her entire reign, were now crumbling into dust, exposed in a blaze of sparks, public humiliation, and the cold, unyielding light of digital truth. The aftermath of the electrical spectacle was swift and decisive. Officer Kim, with her meticulous documentation of the scene, Ethan's irrefutable data, Zara's viral video, and Mr. Langston's compelling testimony, had more than enough evidence to proceed. Karen Dobson, stripped bare of her authority and dignity, was issued citations not only for grand larceny of utility services, but also for creating a public disturbance and reckless endangerment, the latter stemming from the unsafe and unauthorized electrical connection itself, which Ethan's system had merely exposed. The image of her, pale and trembling as Officer Kim methodically wrote out the tickets, was a stark visual contrast to her former tyrannical reign. The assembled neighbors, once intimidated by her, now watched with a silent, collective satisfaction, a palpable sense of a long overdue reckoning. There was no cheering, no overt gloating, just a quiet, profound nod of collective understanding that justice, in its own electrifying way, had finally arrived. The news of Karen's downfall spread like wildfire, not just within Meadowbrook, but through the endless currents of the internet. Zara's video, initially a local sensation, exploded into a global phenomenon. Millions watched the clip, captivated by the audacity of the HOA president and the ingenious, poetic justice delivered by the quiet engineer. Ethan, much to his discomfort, found himself inadvertently thrust into the spotlight. Media outlets, sensing a compelling David and Goliath narrative, descended upon Meadowbrook Estates. He politely declined most interviews, preferring the quiet hum of his circuits to the glare of television lights. However, he did agree to a brief, almost clinical explanation of his controlled feedback system for a technology news segment, focusing on the principles of electrical safety and property protection. Rather than any personal vendetta, his calm, articulate demeanor, coupled with his understated brilliance, only further cemented his image as the unassuming hero. The HOA board, reeling from the public relations nightmare and the undeniable legal ramifications, convened an emergency meeting. Karen, predictably, was immediately stripped of her presidency and all board privileges. The swiftness of her removal was unprecedented, driven by the overwhelming community outrage and the very real threat of lawsuits from residents whose property values might be affected by the HOA's now tarnished reputation. A new election was called, and significantly, Mr. Langston, emboldened by the recent events and urged by his grateful neighbors, put his name forward for a board position. His campaign was simple: a return to transparency, accountability, and genuine community service. A stark contrast to Karen's reign of terror. Karen's carefully constructed world imploded. Her attempts to spin the narrative, to portray herself as a victim of a malicious attack by a dangerous individual, fell flat. Every public statement she made was met with immediate, overwhelming counter-evidence from Ethan's data, Zara's video, and the growing chorus of neighbors, now unafraid to speak out about her past abuses. The legal proceedings against her were protracted but ultimately conclusive. Faced with the mountain of evidence, and after failed attempts to negotiate a plea, Karen was eventually found liable for the theft of services and financially responsible for the damage to her ATV, which Ethan, in a gesture of pure, understated integrity, provided an assessment for its repair, stating it was repairable, not destroyed. The ruling, a quiet victory in court, resonated loudly throughout Meadowbrook. She was also ordered to pay restitution for the estimated electricity she had stolen from Ethan and, remarkably, from Mr. Langston, whose testimony had been crucial. The financial burden was significant, a tangible price for her hubris. Life in Meadowbrook Estates began to slowly, but irrevocably, change. The cloud of petty tyranny that had hung over the community for so long began to lift. Neighbors started interacting more openly, a sense of quiet solidarity replacing the previous guardedness. There were more impromptu block parties, more genuine conversations over fences. Ethan, while still valuing his privacy, found himself approached by grateful residents, not for his engineering prowess, but for his quiet courage. Children, seeing him tending his garden, would sometimes point and whisper, "That's the engineer who stopped HOA Karen." He would offer a small, shy smile in return. Mr. Langston, true to his word, was elected to the HOA board. bringing with him a calming presence and a commitment to fair governance. He initiated regular, transparent community meetings, revised outdated bylaws, and, perhaps most importantly, introduced a new neighbor courtesy clause that emphasized respect for property and shared resources. The days of arbitrary fines and unchecked power were unequivocally over. Ethan, for his part, removed the specialized controlled feedback system from his outdoor outlet. His point had been made, the lesson learned, and the balance restored. He returned to his usual routine, the quiet hum of his home now truly a source of comfort, no longer a silent accomplice to theft. The only lasting memento of the ordeal was a small, knowing glance shared between him and Zara whenever the subject of unauthorized connections came up in conversation. Zara, too, had matured through the experience. While she continued her online presence, her focus shifted slightly, using her platform to advocate for community issues and highlight unsung heroes. Understanding the power of responsible digital storytelling, Karen Dobson eventually sold her house in Meadowbrook Estates. The constant whispers, the pointed stares, and the undeniable shame became unbearable. She moved to a community far away, presumably to start anew. Though the story of HOA Karen and the engineer's electrifying justice would forever be a part of the internet's folklore. Her ATV, repaired but forever stigmatized, was seen parked at the local mechanics for months before it too vanished, a forgotten symbol of her downfall. Ethan Clark, the quiet engineer, remained in his well-ordered home. He had never sought confrontation, never desired fame. All he wanted was to live his life free from exploitation, by choosing intelligence over aggression. By leveraging his unique skills in a moment of audacious challenge, he had not only protected his own peace, but had, inadvertently, liberated an entire community. The power of a single, well-placed spark, it turned out, could indeed illuminate the darkest corners of suburban tyranny, leaving behind not just charred wires, but the clear, unyielding light of justice. His story became a quiet legend in Meadowbrook, a reminder that true power often resides not in the loudest voices, but in the sharpest minds, and the unwavering conviction to stand against those who seek to take advantage. The gates of Meadowbrook Estates, once a symbol of Karen's control, now felt like a gateway to a truly free and respectful community, built on the foundations of a lesson learned with an electrifying jolt. Ethan's clever retribution against Karen's blatant abuse of power proves that sometimes the quietest individuals wield the most impactful solutions. We hope you enjoyed witnessing this electrifying tale of suburban justice and sweet vindication. Thank you for watching. If you were shocked by this story, please like this video, subscribe for more powerful narratives, and share your thoughts in the comments below.